Ayara, and today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in October. Now, overall, I read 8 books, and I'm actually quite happy with that, considering that in September I only read 2 books. Yeah, it was terrible that month. And hopefully I'll keep the pace that I'm getting into and read even more books in November. So let's get started. The first 4 books I read in October, I read while the Ripesat was happening, which is the Read Your Bookshelf-a-thon that was hosted by Miranda from Books 101. I'm going to just briefly mention the books that I read, and I'm going to link down below my wrap-up if you want to hear more about the books and my thoughts about them. I read The Boxers and Saints duology by Jen Luen Yang. It follows the perspective of a boxer and a saint. It's the same story, just different perspectives. In the Boxer Rebellion in China, and I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson, which is a crime thriller, and it won the Crime Thriller of the Year award. It was also recently turned into a movie. So, I didn't know that. That's nice. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. And afterwards, I read Tales of Ancient Egypt by Roger Lancel Green, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. After Ripesat ended, I wanted something that was a bit more spookier and creepier for Halloween. And the book that I picked up was Insanity by Susan Vaught. Now, Insanity, it follows a town called Never, and in the center of the town there's a hospital for the mentally ill, and it turns out that hospital is a gateway to the other side and spirits and ghosts. And the book consists of 4 short stories that intertwine in different time periods or different years about different people in Never that had to do with, like, you know, the other side and the gates and ghosts and spirits. Now, I kind of have mixed feelings about this book. Like, half of the book, and not the half that I expected that I loved, but the other half, the other 2 stories, which I expected to like, I really didn't like. The first story follows Forrest, which is the most, like, it's like the oldest stories out of the 4 stories, and how she finds out about the other side and the powers and the spirits and everything. And what I dislike with her story, so Forrest gets this kind of explanation about why certain people can see ghosts, and the only explanation that we really get is that they have Madoc blood. Don't worry, it's not that big of a spoiler. Now, it kind of bothered me that we didn't get a more in-depth explanation about, like, why and what's so special about the Madoc blood and so forth, and I actually spoke to the author through Twitter, so I'm going to link her to her down below if you're interested. She's really, really sweet. She told me about how she wanted to have more mythology in the book, but she ended up taking it out, which I think is a real shame. I would have loved to have seen more of the mythology, the Welsh mythology in this book. Also, another thing that I didn't really like with Forrest's story is that there was a small case of insta-love. I get why it had to be so fast-paced, given how short the first story was. Like, this is how much the first story was. It was a really small part out of the book, so I get why it went, like, so fast, but I still felt that it was a bit of too much insta-love. The second story follows Darius, and it's more in the future, and his story about a family ghost, you can say, that comes and hunts him. Can I just tell you that the ghost in that story freaked me out? I kind of have, like, this fear of what the ghost was. The story after that follows a girl. It kind of gives an explanation to the first story. I really enjoyed it. And then the last story, which was from Levi's point of view, which you'll get to know in the first story and in the prologue, it was the story that has taken the rating down for me. I really didn't like reading from his perspective. I didn't believe him as a character. He seemed like the kind of character that has no backbone. Like, everybody told him what to do, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna show off my muscles for like 2 seconds, and then I'm just gonna, you know, like, I'll just do what they tell me. Like, really? You're trying to, like, appear tough next to the girl, which kind of annoyed me. And also in Levi's story, kind of wraps up all of the mini stories in this book. And, like, the big bad thing that everyone was afraid of throughout the book was really disappointing, I want to say. Like, it wasn't bad, it just wasn't what I was expecting, and I was like, that's not so big and scary compared to like what was happening in the second book, for me at least. But given that I really loved half of this book and then I really didn't like half of this book, I'm giving this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. And can I just tell you that Susan's writing is amazing. I loved her writing. There was one thing that I would recommend this book, even though I had parts that I really didn't like, is the writing, you guys. She writes so beautifully. Just next, after that, I wanted a short book. I don't know why. I was just like in the mood for like something that's short and nice and I'll just be able to fly through. And so I picked up the next book and I didn't realize who wrote it. And that's The Eye of Mines by James Dashner. Now, if you've seen one of my videos before, you know that I never finished The Maze Runner, and I gave away my copy of the Maze Runner trilogy because I just really disliked James Dashner writing and I couldn't get into the story at all. And so when I bought this book, I didn't even realize that James Dashner wrote this. I didn't realize it was the same author. And then I picked up the book and I'm like, New York Times bestselling author of The Maze Runner. Oh, I was like, I'll give this book a chance. And I started reading it, and wow, like, the author, in my eyes, progressed so much with his writing skills. I just loved the writing in this book. Loved it, and I couldn't put this book down. It was with me everywhere I went. I also got sticky noted with my comments and things. The Eye of Mines follows Michael. Now, Michael is a gamer who lives in this futuristic world where there's the Vertinet. Basically, everyone at night can connect to this coffin, and the coffin like connects to your body and your nerves, so everything that you feel in the game, it's like 100% felt in the physical world as well. And basically what happens is you start out the game, it's like this virtual world, and you have to go through different experiences to get points. The moment that you complete certain experiences and get some points, you can move on into the Deep, and the Deep is supposed to be like this, like the upgraded version of the Vertinet that every single gamer wants to get to. Now, Michael, with his 2 friends, is a hacker, and they're like this like threesome of hackers, and they kind of reminded me a lot of the Golden Trio from the Harry Potter series. So if you liked that dynamic, then you'll probably like The Eye of Mines. And what happens is there's this one gamer who's making people want to kill themselves in the game and out the game, and certain people suddenly wake up like brain dead in their coffin and nobody understands why. And so I don't remember how the security is called, but like the government in this virtual world decides to talk with Michael and tell him like, we want you to go and find Kane. Kane's the gamer, and just find him. So we'll take it from there. You go and you find him and help us, basically. And so we can stop everything that's happening. And there's something called the morality doctrine. And basically the moment that they told him those 3 words, are like, yeah, now you have to help us or we're going to kill you, your family, everyone you know. So you kind of stuck with that. And so, of course, he helps them so that his family members, friends won't die and himself. And he gets the help of his 2 friends. And oh my god, guys, this book was so fun. Like, it's had that ridiculous feel to it that Percy Jackson sometimes has in like the Percy Jackson books. Like, you everything changes from a moment to moment, and it's like you have kind of theories. You're trying to understand who's Kane, what does Kane want, what's like the end game and everything. So just so you guys know, this are all my theories. The purple is like the answers to the theories. We do get answers, 3 answers to be exact, and comments, my comments, because sometimes I was like, oh my god, like the characters, I just had a comment on it. But I know that there's mixed feelings for The Eye of Mines, and I get what people are saying. Like, it does remind me a bit of The Matrix. It's kind of like a Matrix meets Percy Jackson kind of book. And sometimes the characters were a bit slow, like not so slow. They're like, it took 1 page, 2 pages for them to understand something that the reader understood the first time, but it didn't bother me that much, considering how much I just like The Maze Runner, like as a book, not as a movie. I love the movie. And how I had so little expectations going into The Eye of Mines. I really love The Eye of Mines, and I definitely suggest people who try to read The Maze Runner and couldn't get into it, pick this book up. It's fantastic, it's amazing, it's so different than The Maze Runner. I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next 2 books that I read were Slammed and Point of Retreat by Colin Hoover. Yes, I finally picked this series up. The first book that I'm going to talk about from that trilogy is obviously the first one, Slammed, and it follows Laken. Laken's father died from a heart attack, and so she, her mother, and her brother moved to Michigan. And the first day there, she meets the guy who lives across the street from her, who is Will, and she and Will really hit it off. They go on one date, they have like 3 really great days, they really start connecting, and then she goes to school on Monday, and what do you know, he's her teacher. Yeah, and the entire book basically follows her dealing with the fact that she's kind of falling in love with her teacher, as well as it just basically deals with grief and, you know, how to grieve over people, how to deal with things in your life. And I really liked Slammed. Like, I'm not someone who likes contemporary that much. I would much rather read a fantasy or a sci-fi book than read a contemporary book. But I really enjoyed this book, as well as the Slammed poetry. It was amazing. It was so on point, and I really, really loved it. And I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. That takes me to the second book in the trilogy, which is Point of Retreat, where we had Kirsten. Oh my god, she's like the best 10-year-old character ever. Like, I loved Kirsten. She was so, like, witty and funny, and her mother too. I really like Cherry. She's really, really sweet. Actually, Lindsay from Lindsay Ray, which I love, and you should totally see her videos, she read this last week, if I'm not mistaken, and she talked about how she didn't like it because she felt that the characters were so immature in this book. And like, I get what she's saying, because there's this issue that comes up, and both of the characters deal with it. I don't want to talk about it, I'm not gonna talk to you, blah blah blah, which is obviously like very childish, but at the same time, I felt like Colin did it on purpose to show, like, even though they're acting like grown-ups and they act like they have everything figured out, it's the small things that will remind us how young they actually are. So I didn't like it, but at the same time I understood where it came from. But can I just say that I really enjoyed reading from Will's point of view. It wasn't like with Allegiant, when you didn't know that you're reading from Tris or Tobias. I really felt the difference. I know that some people don't, but I really liked reading from Will's point of view much more than Laken. I feel like I connected more with Will as a character than Laken as a character. And I felt like Point of Retreat was more intense than Slammed. Like, with Slammed, there weren't like this major things that were happening to the actual main characters, just things that happen to side characters. And even though I did kind of have a problem with how childish they were at some points, it didn't really bother me, and so I give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, because I love Colin Hoover's writing, and I love the slam poetry and the diary entries. That's the end of my wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please tell me what you read in the month of October, and tell me if you read one of these books, what do you think about them. Like, do you want to read one of them? Thank you, and I'll have another video up for you guys soon.